Ah, Mama, somebody help me. Zola, what is this? Mama, help me, please. I don't know. I woke up like this. Zola was a young lady who was so beautiful that everyone in the village would stop and stare whenever she walked by. She had smooth, dark skin that glowed in the sun, eyes as bright as the morning star, and a smile that could calm a crying child. She was the only daughter of her mother, Mama Zola, who sold roasted corn in the village market and always had a cheerful smile on her face. Everyone said Zola got her mother's beauty, but in a much stronger way. If her mother was a candle, Zola was the bright morning sun. Men from all over the village would come to see her, bringing her and her mother gourds of palm wine cassava, groundnuts, and even baskets of tomatoes and fresh fish, just to win her heart. Some would pretend they were just being kind to Mama Zola, but everyone knew they wanted Zola to look at them with her sweet smile. Zola would smile and say, "Thank you, my brother," and then laugh lightly. She enjoyed the gifts, but didn't pay too much attention to the men. She would help her mother roast corn in the evening and laugh with her friends, not minding the men who stood far away, watching her as if she was the only spring in a dry desert. Her father, Baba Zola, was the happiest man in the village. When he went to any palm wine bar, young men would rush to pay for his drink, hoping he would give them his daughter's hand in marriage. Baba Zola would smile from ear to ear, patting his big belly and laughing, saying, "You people want my daughter. Zola ... You have to try harder." He would drink the free palm wine, chew his cola nut, and laugh again while the young men begged him, "Baba Zola, please let me marry her. I can give you a goat, even a piece of land." Meanwhile, in another small mud hut in the same village, Funk, Zola's stepsister, was burning with jealousy. Funk was also a young girl with soft skin and a round face, but people didn't notice her much. Men would walk right past her to go and greet Zola, and this made her furious. She would look at her mother, Mama Funk, and complain, "Mama, I am even more beautiful than Zola, but look how the men bring yams and palm wine to her. I'm sure she is using a charm on them." Mama Funk would sometimes hiss and wave her hand. "Forget about her. My daughter. Maybe it is just her luck." But this time, Mama Funk looked at Funk quietly and nodded her head slowly. "You may be right, Funk. Maybe she is using a charm. But let me tell you the truth. Zola is beautiful." Funk's face twisted like a baby who just tasted a bitter leaf. "Mama, so you're saying I am not beautiful? Am I a goat? Why don't men look at me the way they look at her?" Mama Funk looked at her daughter's angry face and burst out laughing, slapping her thigh. This girl, you look like me, and I am beautiful, too. But let me not lie, Zola's beauty is shining too much." But as Mama Funk laughed, her eyes became small and sharp, like a cat's. She stopped laughing and looked around carefully before leaning closer to Funk. "Funk, listen to me," she whispered. "Tonight, we will go somewhere together. We will put an end to this madness once and for all." Funk's eyes widened, and her heart began to beat fast. "Mama, where are we going?" "Just wait. You will see," Mama Funk replied with a wicked smile. That night, it rained heavily. The wind blew hard, shaking the small huts, and thunder roared in the sky like an angry drum. Everyone stayed indoors, covering themselves with blankets, but Mama Funk and Funk didn't care about the rain. Mama Funk told Funk's younger siblings, "Lock the door and tell your father we went to relieve ourselves. If he asks, tell him we will be back soon." They wrapped their heads with black cloth, tied their wrappers tightly, and stepped out into the cold rain, carrying a small black calabash wrapped in red cloth. The mud road was slippery, and the cold water soaked their clothes, making them shiver. Funk almost slipped, but Mama Funk held her hand. Funk wanted to ask where they were going, but fear tied her tongue. As they walked, thunder struck again and Funk jumped. "Mama, are we not going to die in this rain?" Mama Funk hissed. "Be quiet. Do you want the spirits to hear us and ruin our plans? Just walk." As they reached a bush path near the big iroko tree, a loud owl hooted above them, and Funk screamed, "Mama, a witch! A witch!" Mama Funk slapped her on the back. "It is not a witch. It is an owl. Be quiet before you wake the spirit." Funk's teeth were chattering, not just from the cold, but from fear. She regretted following her mother, but it was too late to run back. She started praying in her heart, "God, if I come back alive, I will never follow Mama at night again." They finally reached a small clearing where the rain didn't touch the ground because of the thick leaves above. Mama Funk dropped the calabash on the ground and began to chant, her voice mixing with the sound of the rain. Funk looked around and saw small red eyes blinking in the darkness. She didn't know if they were rats or spirits, but she was too scared to ask. Suddenly, Mama Funk shouted, "Funk, bring out the mirror!" Funk's hands were shaking as she brought out a small, cracked mirror from her wrapper. Mama Funk took the mirror, placed it on top of the calabash, and began to chant again, calling Zola's name. The wind blew stronger and the rain fell harder, but Mama Funk's voice was louder than the rain. "Funk, repeat after me," Mama Funk commanded. Funk's lips were trembling, but she repeated the words her mother was saying, calling Zola's name, telling the spirits to take away her beauty and give it to her. Suddenly, a flash of lightning struck near them, and they both screamed, falling into the mud. "Mama, I want to go home," Funk cried, her body shaking. But Mama Funk held her hand tightly, her eyes shining with a strange light. "It is too late to go back now, Funk," Mama Funk said, her voice deep and strange. Funk was trembling as they finished the strange ritual her mother made her do that rainy night. The thunder still roared far away, and the cold rain made her body shake. But fear was the biggest thing, making her tremble like a wet chicken. She held her mother's wrapper tightly as they walked back to the village. Her feet slipped in the mud, and she almost fell many times. Her heart was beating fast. She could still hear her mother's chants in her ears, calling Zola's name, calling spirits to take her beauty. "Mama, are we safe?" Funk asked, with tears in her eyes. "Keep quiet and walk," Mama Funk hissed at her, looking around to see if anyone was watching them. When they reached their hut, Funk banged on the wooden door. "Open! Open!" One of Funk's younger siblings came, sleepy-eyed, and opened the door. Funk rushed inside and ran to sit on a wooden chair, breathing heavily, her wrapper dripping water onto the mud floor. She held her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. Her hands were cold, and she kept remembering the strange chants, the thunder, the mirror, and the calabash in the bush. Her little sister looked at her and asked, "Sister, what happened? Why are you shaking like that?" Before Funk could answer, Mama Funk shouted, "Go and sleep! Go inside now!" The little girl jumped and ran to the mat, afraid of her mother's loud voice. The room became quiet, except for the sound of Funk's teeth chattering. She leaned forward, looked at her mother with fear, and whispered, "Mama, are you a witch?" Mama Funk's eyes widened. "Be quiet," she shouted in a low voice, looking around quickly, even though they were alone. "But Mama, that—" Funk tried to speak. I said, "Keep quiet before you bring trouble to us," Mama Funk snapped, pointing a warning finger at her. That night, Funk could not sleep well. Every small sound made her jump. When the wind blew the window open, she screamed, thinking it was a spirit. Her mother kept hissing at her, telling her to sleep. Finally, The morning came and Funk closed her eyes, tired, but she heard a loud scream from the next compound. Ah, Mama, somebody help me! Funk and her mother jumped up from their mat. They looked at each other, fear and confusion on their faces. Let's go and see, Mama Funk said quickly, tying her wrapper and rushing out. Mama Funk followed closely, holding her own wrapper again. They ran towards the screaming, and many villagers were already running to see what was happening. Some were afraid and hid behind trees, while others stood on their toes, trying to see. And there she was. It was Zola, but this was not the Zola everyone knew. She looked like a skeleton. Her skin was dry and pale. Her eyes were sunken and her cheeks were hollow. Her beautiful hair looked rough and scattered, and her wrapper was hanging loosely on her thin frame. People were so scared that they covered their mouths and ran away from the hut. Some women shouted, "Zola, what is this?" While some children hid behind their mothers, Zola sat on the ground, looking at her hands and crying. She could not believe it was her own body. She touched her face, hoping it was a dream, but it was real. Mama Zola, her mother, was the only person who stayed beside her, crying and holding her. Tears fell from her eyes as she asked, "Zola, my child, what happened? Why do you look like this? Did you have a bad dream?" Zola looked at her mother, opened her mouth to talk, but no words came out. She only cried, tears rolling down her thin cheeks, wishing she could wake up from the nightmare. People gathered around the hut but were too afraid to come close. Some said it was witchcraft. Some said maybe Zola stole someone's husband. Others said she used a charm on men and the charm had backfired. A few hours later, Zola's father, Baba Zola, returned from the farm. A young man was walking behind him, carrying Baba Zola's firewood on his head. The young man was strong, with muscles from farming. He dropped the firewood beside Baba Zola's kitchen and wiped the sweat from his face. Then he knelt down, saying, "Baba Zola, I want to remind you of your promise. You said you will help me talk to Zola so she can marry me." Baba Zola was about to laugh and give the young man a cola nut when Funk arrived, panting. "Baba, Baba," she shouted. Baba Zola looked at her with surprise. "What is it, Funk? Why are you running and shouting like a goat?" "Something has happened to Zola," Funk shouted, pointing towards their hut. Baba Zola and the young man looked at each other and quickly ran towards the hut with Funk running behind them. When they entered, they saw Zola sitting on the floor, looking like a skeleton, crying. Mama Zola was sitting beside her, tears falling as she held her daughter's bony hands. Baba Zola and the young man gasped loudly. The young man even stumbled back and sat on the floor, holding his head. "Is this Zola?" Baba Zola asked, pointing at her, and her mother nodded in tears. "Zola, my daughter, what happened to you?" Baba Zola shouted, tears filling his eyes. Zola could not answer. She only looked at him with tears rolling down. Mama Zola was crying. "I don't know. My husband. I don't know what happened to our daughter. She woke up like this." People outside the hut were murmuring, saying it was a curse, saying it was the work of the spirits. Mama Funk was there too, standing in a corner, pretending to cry. She wiped her fake tears and shook her head, saying, "Oh, Zola, what happened? Oh, God, help us." But inside her heart, she was smiling, thinking, "Good. Let's see which man will bring yams for her now." That evening, Baba Zola could not sit still. He called Mama Zola. "We cannot leave our daughter like this. We must take her to the native doctor." They lifted Zola gently, and Baba Zola, Mama Zola, and two young men helped to carry her to the native doctor's place at the edge of the village. The road was quiet, and people peeped from their huts as they passed, whispering and shaking their heads. When they reached the native doctor's small mud house, he was sitting outside, wearing a red cloth with cowries tied around his neck. His eyes were small and sharp like a lizard's. He looked at Zola and shook his head slowly. They laid Zola down, and the native doctor brought out his cowries, bones, and small bottles. He began to chant and throw the cowries on the floor, looking at them carefully. Baba Zola and Mama Zola waited, holding hands and praying silently. After some time, the native doctor sighed. "I cannot see who did this or how it was done," he said, looking at them. Mama Zola began to cry loudly. "Please help us. I don't want to lose my only child." The native doctor raised his hand. "Calm down. Woman, I see a solution. Until Zola finds true love, she will remain like this." Baba Zola and Mama Zola looked at each other. "I don't understand," said Baba Zola. "If she finds a man who truly loves her, a man who loves her enough to marry her, she will return to her former self, even more beautiful," replied the native doctor. They all looked at Zola, who was crying softly, and Baba Zola wiped his tears. "How will we know who truly loves her now?" he asked. The native doctor stood up and looked at them. "Time will tell. Let us pray the spirit of true love shows itself." Zola and her mother returned home from the native doctor's place, and they both could not stop crying. Mama Zola held her daughter close, wiping her tears with the edge of her wrapper, but she was also crying. "My daughter, don't cry," Mama Zola would say, but her voice would break, and tears would drop from her eyes. Zola would look at her thin arms and her dry legs and cry even more. "Mama, why me? Mama, what did I do to deserve this? Which sane man will love someone who looks like me? Every day." Mama Zola would cook herbs and give Zola a drink, hoping she would get stronger, and Zola would sip it slowly, tears falling into the cup. Weeks passed, and Zola could now walk slowly by herself, though she looked like a moving skeleton. The children in the village would see her and run away, screaming, "A spirit! A spirit!" One early morning, Zola and her mother stepped out of their hut to light the fire for cooking breakfast. Mama Zola had tied her old wrapper, and Zola was wearing her mother's scarf to cover her rough hair. They were about to fetch water when they heard loud voices and laughter. They turned and saw young men gathered in front of Mama Funk's hut. Each young man was carrying something. Baskets of yams, cassava, palm oil, smoked fish, and even cola nuts. "Mama, please let me marry Funk. I love her," one of the young men shouted, holding a basket of big yams. Another young man pushed forward. "No, I love her more." "Mama Funk, see what I brought? Palm oil and smoked fish." The men began arguing among themselves, pushing each other, trying to show who loved Funk the most. One said he would build Funk a new hut. Another said he would buy her a goat. The place was noisy, and the young men looked excited. Zola and her mother stood there staring with their jaws dropped. They could not believe their eyes. It was as if all the men who once chased Zola had now turned to Funk. Zola turned to her mother, her eyes filled with tears. "Mama, are you sure Mama Funk doesn't know something about what happened to me?" Mama Zola looked at her side and shook her head. "My daughter, Mama Funk, may be wicked, but I don't think she would do such a thing." But deep in her heart, Mama Zola began to wonder too. Just then, the young men turned and noticed Zola standing there. They all stopped shouting for a moment, looked at her from head to toe, and burst into loud laughter. "Ah, Zola, your time is past," one of them shouted. "When we were bringing you yams and palm wine, you were acting like a peacock, raising your shoulders." Another added, "Look at you now. You are like a broomstick," one shouted, laughing so hard that he bent over. The men continued laughing loudly, and the sound pierced Zola's heart. Her eyes filled with tears, and she turned around and ran back into the hut, crying loudly. "Mama, they are laughing at me. Mama, they are laughing at me," she wept. Mama Zola rushed in after her and held her tight. "My daughter, don't mind them. Please don't mind them." The tears rolled down her own face. Outside, the laughter continued, and Funk came out of the hut wearing a new wrapper with her shoulders high like a proud hen. She looked at Zola's hut, hissed loudly, and walked past without greeting. "Spirit," Funk said loudly so that everyone would hear. The young men laughed and followed Funker around like chickens following corn. From that day, Funk would purposely pass in front of Zola's hut every morning, wearing fine wrappers and smiling, ignoring Zola and her mother. Sometimes she would look at Zola and laugh softly, saying, "Spirit?" Zola would sit in the corner of the hut, hugging her knees, crying quietly. She would cover her face when people passed so they would not see her. A few days later, Baba Zola came back from the palm wine bar. His wrapper was hanging loosely on his waist, and his eyes were red. He had been drinking too much, and when he walked, he staggered like a goat with weak legs. He pushed the door of Mama Zola's hut and entered. Mama Zola was cooking a watery soup for Zola, using small dry fish she borrowed from a neighbor. "My husband, welcome," Mama Zola greeted, wiping her hands on her wrapper. Baba Zola did not answer immediately. He sat down on the wooden chair and sighed deeply. Then he looked at Mama Zola with tired eyes and said, "I cannot take this anymore." Mama Zola looked at him, confused. "What do you mean? Everywhere I go, people laugh at me," Baba Zola said, rubbing his face with his rough palm. "At the palm wine bar today, they laughed, saying, 'See Zola's father. See how his beautiful daughter now looks like a ghost?' They laughed, and I could not drink my palm wine in peace. Tears gathered in Mama Zola's eyes. 'What do you want me to do?' Baba Zola looked at her and said, 'Take Zola to your village. Let her stay there. Funk's wedding is coming, and people will come from far and near. I don't want them to come here and see Zola looking like this.'" Mama Zola felt as if hot water had been poured on her. She could not believe what she was hearing. "So you want me to take Zola away from her own father's house because of Funk's wedding?" Baba Zola nodded. "Yes, it is for the best. I am tired of the shame." Mama Zola's lips shook. "You are choosing Funk's wedding over your own daughter." Baba Zola looked away, unable to meet her eyes. In the other room, Zola was sitting on the floor, listening to everything. Tears fell from her eyes as she hugged her knees tightly. She could not believe her father was sending her away because she was now ugly. That night, Mama Zola could not sleep. She sat outside looking at the moon, tears rolling down her cheeks. Zola came and sat beside her, and they hugged each other, crying quietly. "Mama, why is the world so wicked to me?" Zola whispered. Mama Zola kissed her forehead. "My child, I don't know, but God sees everything." The next morning, very early, while the cockerel was still crowing, Baba Zola woke Mama Zola up. "It is time. Please leave now," he said coldly. Mama Zola stood up, tied her wrapper, and wiped her tears. She went inside and woke Zola up. "My daughter, we have to go. They said we should leave," she said softly. Zola opened her eyes and tears began to flow immediately. She sat up slowly, looking around the hut that had been her home, her heart breaking. They packed their small bags, just 2 old bags with wrappers, a small cooking pot, and a broken mirror. They tied the bags with old cloth. As they stepped out of the hut, Funk and her mother were standing outside, watching them. Funk was wearing a bright new wrapper, smiling, while Mama Funk crossed her hands on her chest. "Good riddance," Mama Funk whispered to Funk. Zola and her mother did not look at them. They held their small bags and began to walk down the narrow bush path, leaving the village. The early morning dew at their feet, and the birds chirped as if nothing was happening. But in Mama Zola and Zola's hearts, it felt like the sky was falling. Zola turned back one last time to look at the village she grew up in, the place where she was once, the pride of the village, the place where young men brought her yams and palm wine, and tears rolled down her face. Now they were sending her away like a shameful secret. Zola and her mother arrived at Mama Zola's village after many hours of walking. Their legs were dusty and their feet hurt. They were tired, hungry, and their hearts were heavy. Mama Zola led her daughter through the small village road, holding her bag on her head, while Zola carried a smaller bag. Zola covered her head and part of her face with a wrapper. But even with the wrapper, her thin body and dry arms were visible. People in Mama Zola's village were sitting under trees, pounding yam or roasting corn when they saw them coming. At first, they did not recognize who it was, but as Zola and her mother came closer, people's eyes grew wide with shock. Some women covered their mouths, whispering, "Is that a spirit?" Some children who were playing with sticks dropped them and ran away, screaming, "A spirit! A spirit!" Zola heard them and felt tears forming in her eyes. She tried to hide her face deeper inside the wrapper, but it did not help. People were still looking and moving away from the road to avoid coming close to her. Mama Zola held her daughter's hand. "My child, just keep walking. Don't mind them." They finally reached Mama Zola's late mother's house, which was now empty with cracks on the mud walls and dry leaves on the ground. Mama Zola opened the old wooden door with her shaking hands, and they stepped inside. They dropped their small bags and sat down, tired and quiet. Zola looked around the small room, remembering the stories her mother used to tell her about how her grandmother would cook sweet palm nut soup in the same house. Now it was dusty and empty, and she was sitting there like a shadow of herself. They had not even rested well when a tall man wearing a red cap and holding a long staff arrived. He was one of the king's guards. "Good afternoon," the guard said with a loud voice. Mama Zola stood up quickly. "Good afternoon, sir. The king wants to see you and your daughter now," the guard said. Zola and her mother's hearts beat fast with fear. Why did the king want to see them so soon? Had they done something wrong already? Mama Zola tied a wrapper well and held Zola's hand. "Let us go." As they walked to the king's palace, people followed them. Some carried their children, standing at a distance, watching Zola as if they were looking at a strange animal. Some whispered, "She looks like a ghost," while others said, "Is she really human?" Zola heard everything, and her eyes were full of tears, but she did not cry out loud. She held her mother's hand tightly. They arrived at the king's palace, a large mud building with a big compound where goats and chickens moved around freely. The king was sitting on a wooden chair with a carved lion's head, wearing a long white cloth with beads on his neck. When the king saw Zola, he gasped and covered his mouth, his eyes wide in shock. People gathered at the palace, pressing against each other, trying to see Zola clearly. The king looked at Mama Zola. "Woman, what has happened to your child?" Mama Zola knelt down with tears in her eyes. "My king, please forgive us for causing fear in the village. My daughter was once the most beautiful girl in our village, but something happened to her. Her beauty disappeared overnight, and now people run away from her." She explained quickly how men once came with yams and palm wine for Zola, and how they woke up one morning to find her looking like this, and how her father sent them away because people were laughing at them. The king looked at Zola again, and his eyes softened. He sighed, "You can stay in this village, but Zola must not scare people unnecessarily. Let her stay inside the house always, so the villagers will not be afraid." Mama Zola nodded. Thank you, my king. We will obey Zola, and her mother returned to the small house. From that day, Zola stayed indoors always. She would only come outside very early in the morning, when the sky was still dark, or late at night when people were inside their huts. Mama Zola fetched water, cooked, and went to the market to sell firewood and vegetables to get a little money for them to eat. Zola would help by washing the plates inside the house or cleaning the floor, but her heart was always heavy. She missed seeing the sun. She missed laughing with her friends, and she missed being the beautiful Zola that everyone loved. One day, without any warning, Mama Zola fell terribly sick. She started coughing heavily, and her body became as hot as fire. She could not get up from the mat, and her eyes were always closed. She would whisper, "Water, water," and Zola would bring water to her, helping her drink. Zola was afraid. She had never seen her mother so weak before. She sat beside her mother, holding her hand, tears falling from her eyes. "Mama, please don't leave me," Zola would cry softly. But Mama Zola could not reply. She only squeezed Zola's hand weakly. For the first time since they came to the village, Zola had to go out alone to fetch water and buy herbs for her mother, early in the morning. She wrapped herself well with a thick wrapper, covering her head and part of her face, and carried a clay pot to the river. As she walked, people saw her and ran away, some screaming in fear. At the river, women were washing clothes and fetching water. When they saw Zola, they shouted, dropping their clothes and running away, leaving buckets and clothes behind. Zola stood there, her hands shaking, tears filling her eyes. She bent down and began to fetch water, tears dropping into the pot as she filled it. As she turned to leave, she saw that even children were hiding behind trees, peeping at her and running away when she turned. Zola walked home slowly, crying, carrying the heavy pot on her head, while people ran away from her as she passed. Suddenly, a voice called, "Wait, let me help you." Zola stopped and turned slowly. Standing before her was a young farmer named Kofi. Kofi was tall, with strong arms from working on the farm, and he had kind eyes that made people feel warm. Kofi looked at Zola with compassion. He did not run away like the others. He did not laugh at her. He smiled gently. "Give me the pot. I will help you carry it home." Zola's eyes widened and her lips trembled. "Are you not afraid of me?" Kofi shook his head. "I know you are a human being. You need help, and I will help you." Zola could not believe it. She slowly lowered the pot from her head, and Kofi lifted it with ease, balancing it on his strong shoulder. They began to walk together. Zola walked beside him, her heart beating fast. She kept looking at him, wondering why he was not afraid, why he was not laughing at her. As they walked, people peeped from their huts, whispering, "Is Kofi mad? Why is he walking with that spirit?" But Kofi did not mind them. He turned to Zola and smiled. "Don't listen to them. You are still a human being, and you deserve kindness." Tears rolled down Zola's face, but this time they were tears of surprise and a small light of happiness in her heart. When they reached Zola's house, Kofi helped her put the pot down and said, "If you need help, let me know. I will help you." Zola looked at him, her lips shaking. "Thank you, Kofi. Thank you very much." Kofi smiled and waved before walking back to his farm, while Zola stood there watching him until he disappeared down the path. For the first time in a long while, Zola felt hope in her heart. To be continued in a few hours. Please stay with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and help share. Thank you so much for watching.